President, you exhibit all the signs of a petty and cruel dictator. And so I ask you, why have women, members of the Baha'i faith, homosexuals, and so many of our academic colleagues become targets of persecution in your country?
That was Columbia University President Lee Bollinger just getting warmed up. He greeted Iran's president with a blistering 10-minute verbal assault yesterday. Ahmadinejad's visit to Columbia sparked intense protests, as you know, and so did his speech today at the United Nations. More than a dozen demonstrators were arrested. Meantime, on Capitol Hill, the House delivered its own slapdown by tightening sanctions against Iran, and 2 senators proposed a resolution calling Iran's Revolutionary Guard a terrorist group. The man at the center of it all didn't flinch, just the opposite, in fact. CNN's Christian Amanpour knows she's at a question and answer session with him tonight. In fact, ran a bit long, so she's not going to be with us. We're going to bring you her one-on-one interview with Ahmadinejad tomorrow. Joining me now is Reza Aslan, author of No God But God. How did this play internationally? Because, I mean, many Americans found it, satisfaction in seeing the Colombia's president, basically, stick it to Ahmadinejad. But internationally, how did it play?
Well, I mean, it played right into Ahmadinejad's hands. I mean, this is exactly what he is so good at doing. Don't let the, plain clothes and the simple language fool you, Anderson. I mean, this guy is very sophisticated in manipulating the media. And I think that the Columbia address, and particularly the way that Bollinger introduced him, which, well, quite frankly, was inappropriate in many ways. True, yet inappropriate. Really
Why
just
inappropriate?
did nothing but bolster his. Well, for 2 reasons. One, because it is rude, and it allowed Ahmadinejad to essentially take the moral high ground by saying, in effect, in Iran, we don't treat our guests this way. But secondly, because in referring to him as a dictator, you're giving this man far more credit than he actually deserves. This is a completely powerless person. He's not in charge of the army. He's barely in charge of the budget. He makes no foreign policy decisions whatsoever. He's not part of the intelligence apparatus in Iran. He can't suggest or pass any laws. He has no power. He's a completely powerless figurehead. And to call him a dictator is really to give him far too much authority.
It seems that every couple of years in the United States, a political leader labels someone, some other foreign leader, a Hitler. I remember when I was a kid, it was Muammar Gaddafi, who clearly supported, terrorists around the world and stuff. But now Ahmadinejad seems to be in this role. Do we give him more power by elevating him to a Hitler status?
Absolutely. It's just simply absurd. I mean, first of all, I'm with you. I think we need to knock off the Hitler analogies that are being tossed around willy-nilly all the time. But more importantly, again, because the president of Iran is basically a powerless figure, the only way that he can bring any authority to himself is by using the bully pulpit, and he uses it with the enormous sophistication by essentially setting himself up as some kind of pan-Islamist leader. Look, the fact of the matter is that there is no other leader in the Muslim world who is talking about the things that Ahmadinejad is talking about, and particularly on an international stage. I mean, when he talks about the suffering of the Palestinians, the injustice of the Gaza situation, the growing gap between rich and poor, and the fact that the United Nations is basically, in the hands of the United States. You don't hear Mubarak saying this kind of stuff. You don't hear King Abdullah saying this kind of stuff, and it makes him an enormously appealing and popular person outside of Iran. And that's the important thing to understand. He is not a very popular figure in Iran, but in the rest of the Muslim world, he's becoming more and more
beloved. So should Colombia have not even invited him because it just gives him a pulpit?
No, they should have invited him, but they should have made the issue less about these peripheral things like his denial of the Holocaust, which is absurd and ridiculous, but which has to take a back seat to the much more important issues of a lack of human rights in Iran, the economic collapse under his regime, the way that his rhetoric has essentially isolated Iran and made life even worse, and the fact that his popularity is plummeting.
Let me play devil's advocate, though. I mean, isn't there some value in hearing this man speak when, frankly, a lot of what he says is just nonsensical? I mean, it doesn't make much sense. And when he comes out with statements like there are no homosexuals in Iran, isn't there some value in him literally being laughed at by an audience?
Absolutely. And that's exactly how to treat Ahmadinejad. You know, there's an old saying that C.S. Lewis once said that, you know, the best way to defeat the devil is to mock him. And that's exactly what we need to do with Ahmadinejad. The more we set him up as this kind of Hitler figure, this dictator, this tyrant, none of which he is, the more we give him the power and the attention that he craves, and which, by the way, makes him a more powerful and more authoritative figure.
Interesting. Reza Aslan, appreciate your perspective. Thanks.
Hey, my pleasure, Anderson.
Cristiano, as I said, sits down with Ahmadinejad tomorrow for one-on-one interview. Should be pretty interesting. We're going to have all of it here on 360. Don't want to miss that tomorrow at 10. Next on the program tonight, incredible power, an extraordinary look at the inner workings of the Supreme Court. CNN Jeff